But it defeats me to understand just how possible it is that capture and overreach is that thing that, you know, almost like 290 members of parliament that have been elected, you've not even talked about the nominated ones, can actually allow for that to happen. That cabinet secretaries, and we have a former cabinet secretary here who will tell us just how is it that one individual can just decide to run the show and that this is complained about, yet it continues.
I think one of the predicaments that we find ourselves in as a nation is not just a president that makes decisions, but also a president that makes roadside declarations. Because I saw, you know, the president mentioned that he has employed about 20,000 teachers. But when you listen to the people on the ground, I'm a parent. I mean, most of us are parents, and we have parents in, I mean, we have kids in school. Some of the things that are said on the streets, some of the things that he says atop of a vehicle, you cannot justify. When you go to the ground and you see the kind of suffering that the schools are going through, the teachers for that matter, the children. And even this CBC, you know, when it started, it was called CBC before we renamed it CBE. It is a new concept, first of all. We have tried to implement it for the last, I think now, 4 years. If it is not workable, we can always revert back. If you're not reverting back, we can make it better. But I think what is lacking in this nation is the goodwill. And now coming to the issue of the executive, the members of parliament in both houses. You've just talked about the 290 members of parliament. Include the 47 women representatives. Include the nominated. I mean, we are actually overrepresented. But do these people represent us? The people that we have in parliament, even majority of the people we have in the executive, they don't represent us. They are answerable to the executive, and they are also representatives of the executive. Because if they were really representing us, Mwananchi, they would be looking at things differently. They would be thinking about us when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to everything. But then, in fact, in Kenya, the toothless parliament that we have can be blamed for all our problems collectively, because they don't answer any question. How can you explain that at one point you pass a finance bill as a house, then the next day you're called to State House by the president, and he says, I'm withdrawing it, and all of them clapped. What were they clapping for? Because, I mean, really, they are really toothless. And I hope that in future we are going to improve. Just how humongous is this animal called the executive, and just how strong is it that, you know, it would overreach, it would actually capture, as we keep saying, to render a whole 13th parliament toothless. And to make it even worse is that even though it has the power of appointing these CSs, that the CSs, we now have claims that they really do not say much. Just how?
You know, Linda, there is something that many Kenyans need to understand. I'm not suggesting Kenyans are not oblivious of the constitutional order. Kenyans understand the law, but usually it is not just the law alone. The law must operate with some modicum of effective leadership. And when the leadership is hell-bent on destroying the very instruments that we need to be using to guide us, you will find that everything will go low. You know, President Kibaki, largely for the 10 years that he was our president, operated under the old constitution. But he made certain tremendous changes, even including the issue of airwaves, the issue of giving more opportunity to Kenyans to express themselves, freedom of association, under the same old constitution. It was only the last 2 years of his leadership that we ushered in the new constitution. So at times it's not the law, it's not the instruments, it is the style of leadership. And we said from the beginning of this regime that there was a dictator in town, and that dictator has been emboldened by certain wrong decisions he makes, but he pushes them through our throat, and we keep quiet. We seem to be numb about this regime in the kind of mistakes they are making.
Will it take a proper broad-based coalition, as they say, that is in the making, to tame this dictator?
No, in fact, this so-called broad-based coalition is a danger to the country, and it's also a danger to itself. Because I thank God, many of the decisions President William Ruto has been making has not consulted the Constitution. What we call public participation may be a simple statement of fact, but with passage of time, I'm sure we'll be made to account for the wrong decisions that he's been making and almost destroying the fabric of our society. It was very clear from the beginning that he wanted to emasculate Parliament. He wanted to threaten judiciary by stifling judiciary with lack of funding and making certain statements, almost creating a mongrel within the government itself. But if the executive was effective, because I've been part of the executive, I've been part of legislature, because we are that dual existence for ministers to be members of parliament, so that at one time you are defending the government position because you are informed by decisions that have been taken through the process.
Right.
At the same time, you've already captured the imagination of Kenyans because you are people's representative. But this one, the way I know, and we get this information because we've been there before, he starts by himself praying, prosecuting every cabinet paper, and finally he makes conclusion and recommendations at the end, and is the last one to pray for the cabinet to disperse.
Wakili, legally, just why should that be allowed in the first place? Because we speak about a very beautiful constitution. Why should we, from January to January, from 2022 up until 2025, talk about a scenario where there is a one-man show that is going on, that perhaps one man calls the shots all through, and that we agree for this to happen?
I do not think that Kenyans, generally, Kenyans as citizens, and a lot of us who are out there have agreed to this. Remember, in the first thing that President Ruto did, even before he was sworn in, was to get people to defect to his party.
Right.
So we started on the wrong note, in the sense that he was able to get people to his side, got the speaker to declare Kenya Kwanza the majority, when it was not the majority.
Okay.
And the High Court recently vindicated that position earlier this year. But in addition to that, even after the High Court vindicated that position, you saw a scenario whereby in ODM there was a discussion. People like Governor Orengo was saying, where are we trying to make peace to deal with Ruto on the basis that on personal dealings between Raila Odinga and Ruto, instead of now asserting our position as Azimio as a majority party. Now, the scenario now that you've ended up happening is that not only is Kenya Kwanza the majority party,
Right.
but that is in the National Assembly, which is an important arm in the House of Parliament. But you also have situations whereby, because of this cooperation, broad-based government, you have the minority and the majority speaking on one side, because the leadership of both the majority and minority are in broad-based.
And democratically, is there anything wrong with that?
There is
Things are going
absolutely-
well, and that
Precisely.
the majority and minority tend to think that all is good.
In a
But-
multi-party democracy,
Right.
and this is where the rubber meets the road. The governance framework is that there should be, for example, audit, PSC, and PIC, the very important the committees of parliament,
Right.
are supposed to be held by people who are not in government. But now when you say you have a broad-based government in which everybody is speaking, you are having a one-state dictatorship or democracy, if we can call it so, where the constitution effectively says and provides for a multi-party framework of governance and accountability.
Let's paint a
But
picture.
equally,
Wakili, let's paint a picture,
yes,
a scenario
yes.
where then we would have been having this broad-based government and things were working well. Well, according to them, it still is working well. But if there was a level of contentment with Kenyans that perhaps things are going on smooth, like it was with the Grand Coalition government, would you still be having this argument?
Yes, absolutely. Because you see, the reason why did we change from single party state is because under single party state, like you've had in Tanzania, and that is where they are having the current problems, the leader sits either wherever they sit, they discuss, then they report to the people that this is the directions that we are going.
Right.
But the framework of a multi-party democracy is supposed to be, it's an open air kind of democracy. You will come, you will take your position and of principle, and you are given even positions that you are going to defend the people from a certain end, the other one from a certain end. That is what, because it's called competitive democracy, and rivalry is part of multipartyism. But the equally important point that I want to underscore that I heard Honorable Kirwa make is that it is also important to know that history has everything to do with this. Remember that President Ruto did not support the current constitution. And he appears to be a guy from the old order that you would even want to become probably a greater tyrant than President Moi used to be. So that now Kenyans, when they never took these things seriously, people went and said during the campaigns, I remember, you are running a risk. If you elect somebody who is natural disposition, and this is a fact, is that he can easily would want to be a dictator. Now, if he arrives there and is a dictator, you cannot start lamenting because you are a dictator because that is the nature of the way in which you do things. And that's